Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DEO Grow Secrets. I'm your fearless host, Emmett Scott, and today I've got Dr. Seth Huish and Dr. Clark Brinton from Arvory Dental Group, which they founded in 2017. It's grown to 8 locations across Oregon and Southwest Washington. They've absolutely been crushing it, been in DEO for a while now, and just excited to dig in with them. They've done a ton with implants, all in X, and all of the above. And so, Clark, Seth, great to have you here. Maybe if you don't
Thank you.
mind, maybe just take a minute. Clark, we'll start with you. Just tell who you are, your story, and then how did you and Seth connect?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having us. Seth and I met the first weekend of dental school. So
Serious.
yeah, we went to
Did you know then?
OHSU.
Did you walk up to him and like, you're going to be my business partner someday?
Not that, but we did know that we both liked to ski and bike and that kind of thing. So that's kind of where the friendship started, I think.
That's
Riding our
cool.
bikes to school.
And what was your dental school path?
Um, we both went to Oregon Health Science. I was a National Health Service course scholar, so I had a 4-year commitment to public health. So I went into it knowing that. Um, so that was kind of my focus. And Seth, I guess yours was a little different.
Yeah, I finished school in Hawaii undergrad and came to dental school with 2 kids. And by the time I was done, I had three, and I figured we need to do something serious to support all these kids. But yeah, Clark and I, we were just buddies, played basketball and did some triathlons during dental school, and uh, just kind of were buddies. But we lived, they put the dental school on top of this mountain, top of this hill, and there's not much parking, so they encouraged people to ride bikes. So we'd ride bikes as an apartment manager with my wife, and eventually we got Clark to move into our complex. He's one of our tenants.
They gave
But
me a
no, it's
sweet
good.
deal on rent.
That's right. But no, we and you mentioned implants, Emmett, and we've had interest in it kind of from the beginning. The weekend before dental school graduation, we well, let me back up a little bit. They had uh, Oregon Dental Conference, and we met one of the guys at OCO Biomedical. He'd invited us to come up. He said, "Hey, it's $1,000. You should come up and do our course in Seattle." And we said, "That's great, but I don't have $1,000. He says, "What about $500?" And I said, "We'd love to come. We don't have $500." He says, "If I gave you a ticket to attend, would you show up?" And Clark and I said, "We would show up."
What?
So we got,
Let
remember that?
me add a little more
You
detail.
guys are tough negotiators being poor.
Well,
We
let me add a little
broke.
more detail to that. What Seth left out was we went to the Oregon Dental Conference, which we got into for free as dental students, and we went
Yes.
to every implant booth in the whole building and asked to attend a course for free, and everybody else told us to get lost. This was the only guy that would like entertain any sort of negotiation with us, and he told us no. Well, we talked him down to $500. And we're like, sorry, we can't even do that. So we left. He called, having run courses now for almost a decade, I know exactly what happened. They didn't fill their course. He called us like 3 days before. He said, "Hey, we got this course in Seattle. You guys can come for free if you want." So they had
We said,
plenty
"We
of
will fill
seats.
that seat." Yes,
Yeah.
we'll be there. And
And
so
that was
we
your
got in an
and how
old.
long had you been out of school? Had you
So
even
this is the weekend
Oh, we were
before
still in
graduation,
school.
Wow. Okay.
and
So we didn't
yeah,
get
Chuck
C
Schlesinger was
credit.
teaching it. Yeah, and it was great. So we went up there, we did the course, and we'd done some restoring and had some exposure in school, but he's like, "No, you need to be placing these things." He said, if you can get some patients lined up, I will come to your office and help you place your first implants, right?" And so I went to Texas, Clark went to New Mexico, and I made a list of all these cases that would be great cases, had 2 pages worth, and eventually I called Chuck up and I said, "Hey, were you serious about coming to the office to place some implants with me?" And he said, "Yeah, I was serious." And so I called Clark, and he flew over from New Mexico. This CE guy came into town, and I placed. There's over 20 implants in 2 days, uh,
Uh,
and we gave the patients discounts, but I got a handle for it, and Clark was there with me, and we haven't really slowed
Yeah.
down since, I don't think so.
But by the end of that, I think he was kind of like, I think he expected to come out, and I don't think anyone's ever worked him that hard. It
And then
was
he's like, "Can I have my $500 now?" Right?
right. Well, he did sell a kit to Seth, so got some limited value out of it.
So when
Um,
did you guys come together and say
Yeah.
we should start something together?
so that's also an interesting story. Um, I was just finishing up my commitment. So I went to New Mexico, but like Seth said, while I was doing public health, I was moonlighting doing IV sedation, surgery, and implants. So we kind of both had seen the potential of, running a GP office, and was low socioeconomic demographic demographic practice. So was Seth. But we saw how much demand there was in that model. We're like, man, if there's demand in this segment of the market, there's got to be demand in every part of it. Um, so my brother, for my birthday, I was finishing my 4-year commitment. He gave me Shoe Dog as a gift.
Mm,
I don't know if you've read it. It's the Phil
yeah.
Knight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Really good.
And it got me fired up. And then it's like, Seth, you got to have this. So I ordered him a copy on Amazon and sent it over to him. And he read it. And then we're like, man, we've got one life. We gotta, because I was kind of felt a little stagnant in what I was doing, trying to figure out my next step. And same thing for him. And we
Well, let me
both,
interject. When Clark says he feels stagnant, he was bored, and so he started his pilot license training on the side. He'd go before and after work and got his pilot license down in New Mexico because it wasn't quite stimulating enough to be doing what he was doing. So yeah, so we
yeah,
get, but Shoe Dog was a big impetus. That is true, big time.
yeah. So we're like, I mean, you talk to, one of the things you talk about is like, what mistakes do you make? Our mistake was just like, hey, let's do this. We're like, we're
That
going to
was the
start a big
entire
dental
business
group.
plan right out of the
Yeah,
gate, right? Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
If
Like,
if
let's move
if a
back to
guy can
Oregon.
start if a guy can start Nike, we can start this dental practice, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So how did you buy your first practice?
So that was another mistake. There was a group of 4 offices, like a small DSO that was going belly up. The one partner had already left. There was one left. There was 4 locations. One had an active lawsuit with an associate that was really messy. So we left that one aside and bought the other 3. And then we bought the practice from a one of our professors from dental school. So we
Wow.
started with those 4, and that's all we could get the bank to lend at
That's
that point.
amazing you got him to lend you that right out of the gate. And
Yeah.
this was 2017.
Hmm.
17. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And you guys both move to the same place at this point because one's in New
Yep.
Yeah.
Mexico,
So
one's in Texas, and
he
you
left
go
New
to
Mexico. I
Oregon.
left Texas. Exactly. My wife was 8 months pregnant. And I said, we're moving. And the doctor said, you really shouldn't move with her this pregnant. And it was like, well, we are. And so she said, if you're going to go, you better put her in an airplane. And so we did, and put her in first class. And we landed in Oregon and had our 4th kiddo. And
Wow.
and a little bit later, we got those 3 practices, and we tacked on the 4th shortly after that. But yeah, it's
And
kind of just a leap of faith, I guess, if you will.
and right out
Yeah.
of the gate, were you marketing them as implants or how are you marketing the practices?
No, it was just trying to get our arms around multiple practices, right?
All
Like,
just general dentistry, bread and butter at this point?
yeah, general
At
dentistry,
this point.
but yeah, but we had that super GP mentality, I think at that point,
Mhm.
where we loved implants both personally, but I don't think at that point we had our business model figured out where it would be GP practice with implant center on top of it. It was more, let's buy GP practices and keep specialty in-house was kind of the
Hmm.
original model.
And you two were like the super GPs. So you did you have
Mhm.
a couple associates that came with those practices?
Yeah, we did. We had one of um the doctor that we bought his practice, he stayed on in that location to work back for a while. But almost immediately we lost the associate, you can imagine what was happening behind the scenes in a failing group, 4 offices. But we were pretty naive at that point. So right after we took over, we lost the associate in one of the locations. So I became the doctor in 2 locations. There were, two full-time equivalent or 2 dentists that I was covering for back and forth between 2 practices that were 45 minutes apart. And Seth was down in the one down south, and we just kind of limped it along and made it happen.
Yeah.
And were you able to get it to grow that first year, or how did you navigate? Or was it just like, holy smokes, what did we do?
Yeah, it was both of those. We both came into it like, okay, we've got, each of us personally had probably 6 figures of savings. So we went into it thinking, okay, we've got buffer, we'll be fine. Um, we got eaten alive cash flow wise at first. I personally burned through that probably within like just because it was so hungry from a cash flow perspective. Because we
Yeah.
took these offices and talking about it now, it feels so stupid, but it's like in our mind, we're like, oh, we just have to take these things and it's just like flipping a house, right? You get it for a bargain, and then we knew nothing about cash flow and you know, but looking at it now, it's like, no, duh, we bought failing practices and they,
With payroll happening every 2 weeks, right?
right.
And a supply cost that were coming down the pipe. And yeah, just
All right.
and
So it
no
was real
rent.
time, very, very quickly, like, okay. So Seth and I were like, we just need to get in and do what we know how to do, produce our brains out and outrun this problem. So we did, within that first year, we'd at least, um, stop the bleed, so to speak.
Was the patient flow sufficient enough, or there was just so much care to be provided?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was this, especially in the neglected group, there was so much dentistry. So it was at least for me, and Seth can speak to him, but for me, it was a big emotional challenge too, because I was going, the one practice where the associate left, they'd had, I think, 3 or 4 docs within the last year,
Mm.
just windmill. So, I showed up and every time I'd show up, I was there 3 days a week, and every time I'd set foot in the door, there was like some unhappy person yelling at me and asking me who I was and why I was there. So, there was
So
that
that on
aspect,
the patient side,
patient side, team
they
member
were,
side,
yeah.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, because you guys weren't only trying to be these super GPs, but like you had payroll you had to figure out how to calculate, and you had staffing that you were hiring, and people who said, typically what I see, you buy a practice and then all out of the woodwork, everyone's like, oh, by the way, they promised me I'd get a raise in 2 weeks. And you just have
Mhm.
all that noise happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of turnover because you had all these disaffected people um, from this prior group. But you just kind of take it day by day and work through it and try to stay in front of it.
You get 24, I guess, 24 or 36 months in, and then COVID hits. So just as you're probably
Yeah.
barely starting to turn a corner.
Yeah. We opened a de novo right
Well,
before COVID. So that was interesting too.
When did you kind of start feeling like, okay, I think we do have something figured out here a little bit? The opportunity.
Pre-COVID, I think after like on maybe our second to third year, I felt like we hit a good stride. Like we were, we'd figured out the full arch thing. At that point in this market, there was very little competition in that space. So
right.
I feel like we were doing really well before COVID to where, at that point we added more locations. I think we were at 7 locations with
Yeah.
that de novo right before COVID.
So you
So
guys went pretty fast
yeah, we went pretty
with the four.
aggressively.
In the
And
beginning, yeah.
yeah, and we were talking about this a little before you hit record, Emmett, but we were up to 10 locations at one point. And one
Yeah.
of the best things we did was get back to 8.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with the Heartland CEO, and at the time they were at about 1,000 locations. They've blown past that now. But I said, "How do you get to 1,000 locations?" And he said, "I sell the losers." And as he went into it, it's like even for them, they don't always, they buy a group, several of them don't work. And as I talk to DEO members, oftentimes, especially when they first come in, it's a new concept that sometimes the way forward is kind of taking some steps backwards, right? And
Yeah.
that's not failure, that's learning.
Yeah,
And frankly, yeah, a lot of that advice came from our conversations with you, Emmett, and our coaches with DEO. We did the Shark Tank, deal, and it was like, you guys should probably get rid of some spots. And so we did looked internally and critically and
well,
listened to
we
those
also went
who,
through the stages of grief, of denial
Sure.
before
yeah, that's
acceptance.
fair.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think
Yeah,
so. And we're so attached as entrepreneurs to our business models that I think there's a little too much identity associated with their
Hmm.
success and their failure. And
yeah.
so
Well,
there's
that was one, when I did my MBA, the biggest takeaway for me was just like to move decisively and to not, you look at the sunk costs. It's, oh, we put so much time and money and effort into that. But from a cash flow perspective, does it continue to lose tens of thousands of dollars a month? Do we want to
Right.
continue to suffer because we suffered in the past? Or do we want to just cut our losses and focus? Because we have a limited amount of bandwidth, right? Does that bandwidth go better to our flagship office to take it from 3.5 to 4.5 million? Or is it on the struggling practice that we can't crack 800 that we have to subsidize payroll every month?
You guys had a good milestone you were telling me this year. Do you mind sharing that? Like each of your practice now or
Yeah, I was telling you, 25 wasn't a double digit growth year for us. Like we've had, that's been kind of our thing that we've been proud of is we've been able to do that every year. This year we didn't. We were pretty even, but we didn't have all of our practices independently cleared 1 million in collections. So I think it's the first year that haven't had like a loser on the board.
yeah, it's awesome. And you've got some that are well above that. Yeah.
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 You're
Yeah.
in all in X space, and I know people get concerned about some of the bigger players in the space. How have you kind of found your niche?
I think it's again, we were talking a little bit before the call. I think it's that our focus is really as um, ownership in the DSO space, right? We have owner partners, JV partners in a lot of the locations, and we have that mentality of we're clinicians as business operators, we're also clinicians and trying to really stick with that identity. So when patients come through our practice, they'll talk about some of the big players. And I went here or there, and I don't think we're never disparaging because there's segments in every market, right? And for a lot of people, those places might be the right fit, but ours is just a low pressure thing, which is counterintuitive, but by not pressuring them, we're able to win a lot of those consults just just by saying, "Hey, we're here if you need us, go wherever." This is informational. And I think they feel the sincerity in that. And then also that, our team, we have great teams. When you go into the practice, the teammates are all really personable. We put a lot of, I think, training effort behind that too, to make sure that everyone that comes in for a consult is treated with a lot of respect, attentiveness. And I don't know that they get that feel at some of the bigger places. So I think we've been able to still do pretty well in the
Oh,
space despite the competition.
Looking at your leadership style, 2017, 18 versus 2026, if you were going back in time, how do you think that you've evolved as a leader of these practices? What's different from the Clark and Seth back then that's better? And maybe even that you're embarrassed about. I always say if I'm not embarrassed about who I was a year ago, I'm not progressing. So
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Seth.
I'd
And then
say we
keep up.
have more confidence in ourselves, like as leaders. I think we second guessed ourselves a lot in the beginning. Like we were
Mm.
like, I think this is right, and then we kind of get other suggestions, and we second guess ourselves. And we got to a point we talked to each other a lot, and we're like, we know, like we've experienced a lot. Like when I was in Texas, I opened 3 or 4 clinics with the group I was down there with. Clark learned a lot bouncing around, and like we have more confidence in what we're doing versus 2017, 2018, where we we're still developing kind of as leaders. And now we can rely on some experience. Clark's gone has his MBA, just that confidence. And I think, you know, having that confidence, people want to follow that. They follow that confidence, and inspiring hope for those in the organization. Like, hey guys, look what we're doing. We're doing really good things, and highlighting that. We do, a summer party every summer. We do, Christmas parties every Christmas. We're highlighting the good things that we're doing, and people want to be a part of that.
And I would take that's all very true. And I think we had to sit down at one point a few years in to say, hey, let's start trusting ourselves. But I'm going to take a little different direction on that question, Emmett, and talk about kind of communication styles. I grew
Yeah.
up with the model of kind of like the strong, silent leadership. That's how my dad is. And I had the going into it like, oh, well, I'm going to lead by example. I'm going to work hard and everyone will follow, right? Which we know doesn't work very well in an organization. And maybe it does at a single practice level, where you show it, teach it, and then they emulate it. Um, but I realized pretty quickly in a group that wasn't going to work. So then I moved into a phase of leadership that I'm not proud of at all, which was because I only knew how to be nice and how to lead by example when we started. And then I developed the jerk side, which was, okay, I'm gonna like, you're not listening. I'm stressed out. I'm gonna come in and show you that I'm in charge. And we also know that's super ineffective. So I had kind of worked through that, found my voice, but I wasn't good at doing it in a constructive way. A watershed moment for me was actually, I think the first time I saw you speak, Emmett, is maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And you were doing, an interactive thing, and somebody was just not very smart, and you're talking to them, and they weren't getting it at all. And you basically told them that they were not very smart and they weren't getting it at all, and they had a big ego in the nicest way I've ever seen anybody do that. And to the point of that's the only thing I remember from that whole conference. And I went and found you in the food line later and I asked you, like, I don't know what that is. I've never seen it, but where did you get that skill set? And then the disappointing answer that you developed it over, 20 years of hard conversations, right? It's not something that you get overnight. But you did turn me on to a few books. One of them was Radical Candor, which I
Hmm.
think is a good read because I think a lot of us we try to be nice people, right, in life, and we want to be nice. But what we do is we avoid critical conversations because we want to be nice. So that was, I think, a big turning point for me is that you demonstrated was I can be a nice person and also be very direct. So I think and I'm definitely not to your level on that, but that's where I'm headed. When I think about leadership is when I go into an office, because there's limited capacity, you can't just go in and hang out and just have FaceTime. The FaceTime's important, but it needs to be with a purpose. So showing up to the office, boots on ground to figure out what's going on there, and then having a friendly conversation with the office manager, asking some questions, but then also giving some critical feedback, but in a friendly way. And then same thing with the doctor, the clinical team. So I think it's, how do you manage it, like Seth was saying, inspire, but also manage behavior and make corrections while maintaining a good relationship. It's,
Mhm.
at least for me, it hasn't been easy, but at least knowing what I'm shooting towards, I think allows us to progress on that.
I saw a meme a little bit ago that I now love, but it said to know what you want, to ignore what others are saying, and to press forward is called courage. It's also called
Hmm.
stupidity, and that's what makes life hard, you know? And
Yeah.
I think trying to figure out your leadership styles, right, kind of falls into that. What am I willing to, I kind of put it in this bucket. What am I willing to tolerate and not tolerate? And how do I communicate that? And I think in the beginning, to be a good entrepreneur, you have to be willing to tolerate a lot
Hmm.
because you're taking so much risk. You don't know what you're doing. You kind of need to be humble in the process. But to get to the next level, you need to be willing to not tolerate certain behaviors. And how do you then have those conversations? Kind of as you were saying, Seth, like, okay, we do know what is right. Now, what's the right way to approach that? I do love
Yeah.
the Radical Candor book. I think what really impacted me about that book is in her four quadrants where she said, okay, when she looked at Steve Jobs and the Google leadership that she worked in, and she said, okay, it's really on a spectrum of how clearly do you communicate and how deeply do you care. And obviously, someone who doesn't care and doesn't communicate well, that quadrant, just fails. But the
Hmm.
quadrants I thought were most interesting is those who don't care but communicate clearly were better liked leaders than those who care but don't communicate clearly. And they called that
Yeah.
ruinous empathy. And I was like, holy
Hmm.
smokes, I'm a ruinous empather. And, and then to figure out how
Yeah.
to kind of step into communicating clearly has been quite a journey. It sounds like that's something that you've taken on, which is amazing. So,
Yeah.
Yep, a work in
It's
progress.
it's so much development of yourself, of your team, and I think it needs to be also said, developing team leadership has been a big part of it. Um,
Mhm.
we back in 17 and 18 we held it all ourselves, and now we have these partners in the locations. They're doing weekly level 10 meetings with their managers and other leadership in the offices locally. We do quarterly, you know, VTO stuff. We're doing, one-on-ones. We do monthly doctor meetings. We're just more routine in checking in, looking at things, looking at metrics. There's more accountability with key performance indicators. Uh, there's more tracking. It's just more systemized, and a lot of that we have thanks to DEO, um, and just kind of believing in giving it a try. So I it'd be a disservice not to highlight like our manager Mackenzie, who's wonderful. She's VP of operations, and she goes and has really good people skills to manage a lot of those tough conversations. But we have local managers in the locations and doctors who have buy-in, and so I don't know that we're the owners of the whole group and the founders and everything, but it really is once people start buying in, it develops its own energy and momentum, and which is kind of fun. And there's a lot of nights I leave, our Thursday night doctor meeting that month, and I think to myself like that was awesome. I'm like almost a spectator, and I'm leaving with this momentum and this energy. Like that was really awesome. Like the doctor's up there talking about something he learned at a CE, and then we have a guest speaker, and then our guy who does our marketing shares something, and we have things shared from our operation side. And once you get that momentum going, it's a lot more fun than the survival days. That's for sure.
Yeah,
how
yeah, it
did
is.
how
And
did you guys cross over from the perspective of I'm paying them a salary, whether that's the associate or the team. They should just do it, right? Because it sounds like there's a magical moment when you as a leader realize that they're kind of your customer too, right? That
But yeah,
developing them and taking time to invest in them despite your overwhelm, that's really where the magic's going to happen.
yeah, and it's so funny you say it in those words because that's exactly, I think
the
it's probably
conversation. Yeah,
3 years ago I had that conversation with Seth. I was like, Seth, I just realized something that really dumb, which was that, for so long we think of, and that's a big thing we push to all of our team members is the patient experience, the patient experience. Is like,
Yeah.
we've been so focused on the patient experience and we need our offices to continue to do that. But you and I need to be focused on the partner experience, right? We made a conscious
Yeah.
decision to pivot from associates to partners, but we have to, like, our customer are
Yeah.
the partners that have bought in, that trust us. They're taking a chance on us. So we have to deliver to them. We have to communicate well to them. So everything we do, when I put the CEO hat on in the day to day, that's the perspective I'm coming from. How does this impact my partner in this location? How does it impact his team? Um, so that's kind of when we're making decisions on technology we're gonna get, all that, we try to get buy-in, I guess literally buy-in from all the partners. We'll have those monthly meetings. We'll present options, say, hey, we've looked at this. This is the research we've done, but we're taking it now to you to think, or to look at it. This is the discount we get as a group. This is why we think it would be good, but ultimately we want, your feedback, your thoughts, your buy-in. And that's been a really great way to run things from a communication perspective. When we first started, we'd think up, all the ideas, and then we'd tell Mackenzie, the VP of Ops, and to go to the offices and implement it. And we got all this pushback of, oh, corporate telling us corporate this. And Seth and I were like, corporate? What do you mean corporate? It's Clark and Seth.
It does. Yeah.
So all we did, the only change we made was to present those changes at the doctor meetings to the dentists and say, okay, now take this back to your office. It was a night and day difference on the buy-in and the implementation by
Yeah.
them coming back, because then, in their practice, they're like, oh, well, doctor wants me to do this, as opposed to somebody coming in from corporate to, make their life hard.
What would you say to a single practice who either one hasn't hired an office manager yet or has an office manager, but maybe he's not fully utilizing them? Maybe they're scared to let them see financials. There's that
Hmm.
that weirdness where the office
Yeah.
manager is asking for raises for everyone, but the dentist is struggling to even make payroll, and they're
Mhm.
just not on the same page. How would you coach them?
Yeah, I think that's also something we lived, right? You talked about like, what do you tolerate and what do you don't, what do you not? When we started, it was like, if it makes financial sense, we tolerate it. If it doesn't, we don't. So I think there's like a live and die aspect to any business of that. But beyond that, it's creating the culture, right? And as we started, I had this mentality of like, I saw every vendor with suspicion, almost like, oh, we need money and they're trying to take money from us. And at some point, you make this mental shift of my greatest asset is my time, and I have a limited capacity to impact others. And what am I going to do with this limited aspect of time? Because the money follow. Eventually, you learn that when you get the culture in place and you develop a team, the money kind of follows. And I think that is at least me, it was a hard shift. And I think it's a hard shift for dentists because we're taught to create with our hands, right? We go in and we create something and we get paid for it. So trying to step in, it's hard. It's not like a lawyer. All they do is talk and they get paid for it. A dentist, if you're not making or doing something, you don't get paid. So to create that or make that mind shift into, okay, me communicating and talking to these people and training these people actually has a real financial impact.
Mm.
It should be obvious, but I think coming from a technical perspective as a dentist, it's hard because we're in all the details. We want to know everything about everything. We want to, that's the classic thing of the dentist micromanages the whole office.
Yeah.
And, I think it's like that letting go of the rope where you communicate. First, you have to communicate well, right? The other thing is they say, oh, well, I tried that and it was a disaster, but they wanted them to read their mind. They didn't
Right.
have good SOPs, they didn't have procedures in place. They didn't train well. But what I would say to them, I guess in a nutshell, is if you want to get to the next level, You can't do it all yourself. You need to develop a team. And it's just like having kids and teaching them, to load the dishwasher or fold their clothes. It's twice as much work for a short time. And then it really opens up. You,
It's fascinating because, obviously us coaching 2000 practices every week and just the number of conversations I have, I get to see patterns. And
mm,
some of the patterns that I see, not just among dentists, but high performance team members, is those who things come naturally sometimes are the worst at leadership, right? Because they're just like, you just need to do it, because
mhm.
that's how they did it. They just leaned in, they're A-type personalities, and their lack of patience, their seeing a problem, fixing a problem accelerated so much of their career. And now to be able to see a problem and sit on that and, using your analogy to train someone else to slowly load the dishwasher, to have patience rather than urgency around something
Yeah.
is so different. The way I see it
And so hard.
manifest oftentimes with dentists is, to your point, they become cost managers, not investment managers, right? So
Hmm.
it's about like, how do I reduce costs everywhere, but not necessarily how do I get the highest return on investment, even for their own time. So they
Right.
find
Right.
themselves doing $10, $50 an hour jobs, partly because they're unsure how to do the $10,000 an hour job that they really need to learn next.
Well, and they're unsure, and it's there's uncertainty around it, right? There's fear of failure. That's the other thing that I think is really common for dentistries, and probably, like you said, any high performer, is fear of failure. We spent way too many years in school taking tests that if you get it wrong, you get a bad grade or you fail the class. Whereas in business, like, I look at we're talking about our last year a little bit. One of the things we wanted to do was bring marketing internally. We put together the avatar of who we thought we wanted, hired a very qualified person, who's a great person, but it was the wrong person for the job, and it was a complete disaster. Um, but in that process, we got connected with the person who's now our VP of marketing, who's amazing and a great fit. So, we went face first into failure to end up where we wanted to be. Had we been, but there's a lot of uncertainty in that move of, hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna have this six-figure salary. We don't know exactly what the position is, but we know we need to develop it. If we would have just set on it and not done it for fear of that failure, we'd be a year later and still not, have that task accomplished. I mean, the same thing with our VP of Ops. We had an
Yep.
original VP back in 2017 that was a terrible fit. It created a lot of stress and problems, but
Oh
it
yeah.
led us, indirectly to our current, to Mackenzie, who's been amazing.
That's a fascinating part to me. How many times people say, "Yeah, I tried that before and it didn't work." And my comeback is, did you ever like anyone in junior high school? How did that relationship work out? How about high school? Did you date anyone there? How did that relationship work out? Right? Like, it takes iterations on relationships to mature into what's ultimately going to be a marriage and so forth. But it's not like you stop dating because junior high, didn't play
Mhm.
out well, right? But
Yeah.
I think to your point, it takes a lot of courage to lean into iterating. You see that on like, associates piece. I
Big
tried an
time.
associate and it didn't work out, or they're not as good as I am. And it's like, yeah, you're just not a good enough leader yet, but we can get there. Right. So,
Well,
Mhm.
and Emmett, that's I've seen that. Like you said, a lot of times I'll bring in an associate. I had one that was such a wrong associate. I mean, we ended up having some real issues he did with the board, and it's a whole long story. I'll tell you someday. It's wild. But what it did is it created a space where we could replace that associate with the right associate. And oftentimes we fail before we succeed, or we fail and realize that's not the route we want to go. Um, I mean, in the beginning, we thought we wanted to do everything. We opened a dental lab. We opened a supply company. We did all kinds of crazy things. We look back and we've learned, and we even had a marketing company in those early days. But now we've learned how, and now we have, I can talk to you what we have going for our lab now, um, which is mostly in-house 3D printing and then some international support. Clark can speak on that. Shutting down supplies, which just doesn't make sense. Although we sold a
Yeah.
lot of masks during COVID.
Yeah, I mean, our original plan, aside from the super GP, was to have a completely vertically integrated business, right? Which sounds great on paper, but again, it
It's
because
bandwidth. Yeah.
yeah, it's bandwidth. There's only so much time and attention. So like supplies from a P&L cost structure is it's not very impactful, right? We're like, oh, well, if we import all our supplies in shipping containers from China, reverse search where Shine and Patterson are getting all their supplies from, contact those vendors directly, fill the shipping container, shipped it over. And I mean, on paper, we saved a lot of money. We got probably equivalent to $500,000 of supplies for 70 grand, which is great. But then you have to store those supplies. You have to get them out to the logistics are nightmarish for a project like that.
Right.
And
By the time you're done, you're like, we could have done 10 cases and it would have been,
Totally.
yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So it's like, okay, the people that do that do well, but they focus on just that and they do it
Right.
at scale, not for 10 offices.
So it's not just shutting down a couple practices. What's happened in your guys' maturity is just overall focus, right?
And
Mhm.
shiny object syndrome kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. I think back to your point of like, I need to have those $10,000 an hour conversations, but I don't know how. When you hit that, like the immature or easy thing to do is be like, oh, well, I'm frustrated in this part of the business. Let me go open a car wash. Or let me go start a supply business because that feels good, because I'm taking tangible steps. I can see stuff happening. But what you really need to do is go read a leadership book and have some hard conversations that don't feel great.
Yeah, that's super powerful. Or this practice isn't doing well. My office manager isn't great. I know what I need to do. Open a second practice, right? Like
Right.
how
Yeah, I
many?
mean, back to lessons learned, right? If I've talked to Seth about this, like if I was to go back in a time machine to 2017,
Yep.
what I would do is, I mean, you guys in DEO call it nail it and scale it, right? We'd go and we'd create the flagship with perfect systems, and then we would find great cash flowing opportunities and practices for sale. I mean, our intention when we started was we'll buy anything that we can get approved for, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So we had our first four, and then our next one was a dentist that had a really bad bicycle injury, and he had to immediately stop practicing, and he was willing to sell our finance, so we picked that up. And then there was an abandoned dental building that hadn't had a tenant in there forever, and we're like, oh, this is a great deal because it's already built out for dental. Not thinking
They're
about
all good deals as long as you
uh,
don't take them out 12 months or 24 months. But at that transaction moment, that's when they're
right,
a really good
right.
deal.
At one point, we bought an ortho office.
We did.
We had an orthodontist lined up that fell through, and so then we went from having what we thought was an asset to a liability that we had to pay to get rid of. So, I think yeah, that's what we mean by the shiny object. Every time we see a too good to pass up, there are reasons that other people have passed it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome when you, going back to what Seth says, you know yourself, but you also get a discipline on taking on the hard things. And in my mind too, sometimes you have to go from A student to F student activities and relearn or learn how to lead in
Mhm.
those areas. Maybe to close this out, let's go to some shiny stuff as a flaming entrepreneur. Where do
Right.
you see, this last 5 years, I feel like have been a real beatdown in some ways in dentistry because all we've had is labor cost inflation inflating without being able to necessarily move revenue quite as quickly. Now, you guys have done some amazing stuff with your LNX to move revenue a little more, but I
Mhm.
do see relief coming through AI. I do see a lot of activities that we are paying for that can start to be automated and move our team up into activities that have higher value. I'm curious where you all are testing some things. I mean, the great thing about DEO is having 550 entrepreneurs right now, all testing different technology that's moving fast. If you hate it now,
Yeah,
just wait 6 months. It's better.
that's
Right.
right.
But
Yeah,
what
I
have you
mean,
guys been testing?
so when I think of AI, I think there's two aspects that I'm pretty excited about. One is what you just talked about, which is like the reduction in labor costs, right? And we went to Filipinos a few years back, so we offshored a lot of our back office type stuff to
And
Filipinos.
and India.
Yeah, India and the Philippines. And also on the lab side, we have the digital design lab in Nepal
Yep.
in partnership with the dental school over there. So they do all of our design. So that's really dropped and now we're FDA listed and they're actually doing the manufacture of finals as well.
Hmm.
So that's been a huge cost savings. And we're actually also just in the process of rolling that out to other DEO members, other friends, those kind of, so that's been a really cool thing. Um, but then with the AI, I just see it as almost a transition. Instead of these remote Filipinos, a lot of that, the menial task, those go over into AI. We have, um, the integrations with,
Mango.
yeah, the big one that we're doing right now is Claritype, which is,
Oh yeah.
where they take the data lake, you upload all your data from practice management, QuickBooks, and then you create your own LLM that you query. So that's where I think a lot of the power is in AI is because we've had the last 10 years, there's been really good data aggregation, right? It's like all this data is available and nobody has the time or bandwidth to analyze it and make sense of it. So
Mhm.
with Claritype, the exciting thing is we can take all this data that we've had and we can immediately pull real-time reports to understand what's happening with our data. It's like, I don't know if you saw in the news with astronomy, where they're making really quick progress understanding black holes and some other these supernova phenomenon. And it's not that they had all these pictures and data that they had from Hubble and all this imaging. They had all this data, but all they've done is overlay AI over the top of it to look for recognized patterns that humans just don't have enough throughput to go through and understand. So I see that kind of as like I guess a cosmic example of what applies to dentistry is, we've got all this data that's telling a story, but there hasn't been anybody to give us the Reader's Digest. And that's where I see AI on that side. And then also we're using like Patient Prism and Mango Voice and some of those products. That's been I think a
Yeah.
huge value add is there's all this, we spend a lot of money on marketing and, there's the feedback loop is tightened up now where we can see where we're losing leads real time and within 30 seconds call back and save a lead that somebody whiffed and then also recognize the training opportunities so it doesn't continue to be costly.
Right.
So those are where I think, made good progress. We've looked at some of the others, like the AI receptionist. 6 months ago was pretty atrocious. It's getting, like you said, like just in 6 months, it's gotten leaps and bounds
Quick.
better.
Yeah.
So we're just starting to implement that. And then, personally, Seth and I think our legal bill was about a third of what it used to be the last couple of years, with the introduction of ChatGPT. And not that we're not using a lawyer, just cutting the hours down by doing drafts and then sending it to them and saying, okay, we have this contract ready. Can you review it? As opposed to create these associate contracts or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's super powerful. We did a call with Josh Rankin just a couple months ago, and he's starting to achieve 30% margins, net margins in some of his practices
Uh-huh.
with the elimination of some of the front desk and just the flow. And it still feels what I call very Microsoft, lots of drivers having to connect with each other, but I can see it becoming Apple-esque over time. And ultimately, I think what happens here is the things that no one really cares about. Like, no patient comes in and says, man, your insurance authorization process is just amazing. Like, nobody
Hmm.
cares about that. Um, so the more we can streamline that back end components of things, and make things simpler for the customer, the more we can actually serve the customer and have all
Yeah.
our energy towards that. I do
Yeah, and I
think.
guess that's the other point too, where it's been really helpful is creating SOPs and processes was really time consuming and costly,
Mm.
because of that. But using AI, we can create SOPs so much more quickly and easily. And then even, like we wanted to come up with a dashboard of information and using, vibe coding, we can go in and mock it up and demo it before, you go out and pay somebody big money.
You can use radical candor concepts and say, I need to have this conversation with an office manager. Use Kim Scott's radical candor to give me feedback on the best way to have this conversation. But what if they
Mm.
say this? But what if this happens?
Hmm.
What if in my performance review, da 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 da? It's really, yeah, it's really incredible, to help
Mm.
develop us to the next level. Well,
Yeah.
guys, this has been awesome. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable. Anything else you want to say to maybe somebody who's listening and trying to figure this out? Like, where would you point them?
Well, I'd be sad if I didn't mention this, but we also meet with Michael Irving regularly, and he's a big technology guy with his background and knowledge and interests and stuff. And so I just want to give a shout out to the, Clark and I have these ideas, but we don't know. We can be confident and lead, but it's really nice to be able to touch base with a mentor and run through things and get feedback. And that's been a really big help. Our tribe leader, having that one-on-one time. So shout out to Michael Irving for sure.
Yeah, and that was going to be my answer is where would I direct them to the DEO, of course, right? Yeah, I mean, it really has been impactful for us. We joined probably 3 or 4 years ago, but the first year I don't think we really engaged. So I think, it's like anything you get out of it, what you put into it. There's a mountain of resources available, but the coaching has been super impactful. Like Seth said, it's nice to have somebody that's a little further down the road to run ideas by and say, hey, we got this going on. And they can say, oh yeah, I had that. And I did tried this and that. And not like we're always again, we're gonna make mistakes, but it gives us some perspective and sometimes a little bit of that courage to,
It's
to
awesome. Well, thank you both and appreciate the kind words to Michael and to our coaches. For those who are listening to this and think, I want to be as cool as Clark and Seth, come over to deodentalgroup.com and you can come join our other entrepreneurs and coaches. Really created something special here with the app, the resources, and great entrepreneurs to be able to connect with. So thank you both. Appreciate having you on. And until next time, keep smiling.